Hey everyone, welcome back to the Investor's Guide to Joy. I have Rob Natale here with me, and he's been an interesting person to get to know because we have similar connections, grew up different sides of the country, but still love, really just investing and really helping people invest. So Rob, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, you bet. So I love that you help, medical professionals, which is really, specific. And just kind of, talking to you and like reading more, about you. I certainly in the medical, field and people be getting into the medical field, they're just
Mhm.
exhausted from the amount of time it takes to get into it. Certainly the, financial strain of it, the emotional impact of it, as well as just like the time. Truthfully, both my parents were not in the medical field, but I really saw how, over the course of their life, they were just so focused on that like end game. Hey, I have, enough money in my, 401k type piece or other kind of future dividend sort of investments, but they weren't really like living life, today. And so I wanted to start off to ask a question of, for individuals who are, waiting for that like big pot of gold on the other side of the rainbow that some people call retirement. Like,
Yeah.
what does that conversation look like, or mindset shift, or is it a tactical thing for individuals to almost just like wake up? And I've really found it's like giving ourselves permission to be like,
Mhm.
no, I do want to change my lifestyle, environment, financial situation. What have you found as you've, talked to people specifically in like the medical field?
Yeah. So as far as it's a good question. I can answer this in a couple different ways, Paul.
Okay.
So it sounds like first my experience, and then I can even share with talking from a client's for experience. So for me, right, I used to be W-2, and then I've gone the road that I've now gone down, which I'm very happy to be as a solopreneur. And what happened for me from a mindset and shift in perspective was from what I was doing and kind of what my role was at my previous position, which we can get into, and kind of going on what we call, like you said, like the hamster wheel, right?
Yeah.
You graduate, start a job, you're doing, your 40, 50, 60 plus hours a week, and you retire at 65. And then it's like, okay, this is then the fruits of all our labor, right? From all that 40 plus years of working. And by the time you get to that point in life, more often than not, you're not going to be as healthy as you would be at a younger age. And maybe some of the individuals that you would want to spend time with maybe have since passed, or they're not in as good of health as they used to be. So it's like, why am I waiting all these years and kind of being tied down to really more or less this kind of system that's been implemented and put in place, right? As far as college, job, retire, 401k, social security, where it's like, let's try to have and experience the best life that we can right now. Because, right, you only get one shot around the sun, one rodeo, so to speak. So for me, it really became a gradual thinking and mindset shift of like, this is just, I don't think the best way to go about doing it. And then also tied into surrounding myself and talking to others who have, which is very important, surrounding yourself either with mentors or individuals who you respect, admire, and kind of hear their stories and say, this is something that makes a lot of sense to me. Why can't I go that route? As far as on the medical side of things, my really role and responsibility is really helping medical professionals defeat burnout, build their wealth, and retire on their terms through investing in real estate passively, so they can experience all those benefits that come with it just without the hassles of being a landlord. So it's in our conversations, when you talked about the exhaustion, this is what's going on in the medical world. Okay. There is
Yeah,
a
sure.
tremendous amount of headwinds in the space, from burnout, lack of work-life balance. There's a tremendous amount of merger and acquisition, or M&A activity, taking place. It's essentially the corporatization of healthcare. Insurance companies are dictating how physicians can treat their patients. They're
Mm.
being measured now by metrics, how many procedures you're doing a week, so on and so forth. They're working the
Hmm.
same amount of hours or more, but getting paid the same amount or less. And their employers in general overall is just they don't have their back. So there's so much headwinds in the medical space right now, where I want to show and help my clients either try to become work optional or empower them to help defeat burnout. We can talk about some of the strategies around that. Maybe they then are reducing the amount of hours that they're working, so they're able to spend more time doing what they philanthropic missions or spending more time with family or travel. I know you're a big traveler. I like to travel as well. Like
Yeah.
being able to travel in different places to where it's not just, again, going and working, and then making money and then retiring in 40 years.
Sure. Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing to, yeah, see and at least for me, experience. At the
Yeah.
same time, it's then to say, hey, like parents, now that you're officially retired, and give yourselves permission. They then can go on, I took them on a trip to Hawaii because I had, extra space. I'm currently in Costa Rica for the next couple of weeks and, have extra space. And so it then has given people, it's an easier like barrier to entry almost
Yeah.
of them just emotionally, where it's just like, oh, the logistics, finances are figured out and I just need to give myself permission. And it's like, yes, that's it. Right. But that is a challenging, thing to do. Is there like a hump that people like overcome or think about? Like I could certainly think if there's a breaking point, right? That people just have, they kind of prolong this thing of like, hey, I, want to get out of the field or, need to make a change. Oftentimes people, allow things up until that breaking point as opposed to like,
Yeah.
making a decision. What have you found that, professionals and maybe it's just specifically medical, are they making, slight changes along the way? Or is it really just that breaking point? They're like, this absolutely needs to change. You can help, solve my problems. And then, they kind of talk to you to see in what way, like you can help them.
Yeah, it's really kind of two pieces of it, right? It can be one bucket and one component being the breaking point that you're talking about where something specifically happens, right? And the other is knowing you want to do something, but not knowing where to go. Okay, so let's use an example. So one of the things outside of also helping clients build their wealth through real estate is, so I'm located in Boston. So what I'm starting to do now, and this is organically just happening within my business, is I'm working with physicians in the New England area explore the opportunity opening their own practice. Okay. And how that's happened is because I've built some different relationships between lawyers, CPAs, individuals that can conduct feasibility studies, 8 real estate agents to help see if this is actually something that can be obtainable. And for physicians, spent 11, 12, 13, 14 years in school, and there's never been any sort of financial education for that, to no fault of their own. So that goes back to, okay, I'd like to explore going to private practice maybe, but like, I don't know where to turn, right? So they kind of know there's that problem, but it's like, okay, what do I do for a solution? And you talked about too, like, right? There's just the amount of hours being worked, like what time is there then maybe even to go and explore and to look into this and starting to put together kind of a team to see if this is possible. So that's one avenue. And then as far as from, like you asked about if is there any specific breaking point, well, I think we experienced a lot of that, especially since or post-COVID with what was going on and the demands where you've seen, and I'm sure you've read as well, where my professionals said I've had enough and they completely have left because of the stress that comes into play. Yeah. And that all ties back into all burnout. And like right now, if you look at it, like the World Health Organization defines burnout as an occupational phenomenon. It is classified as a global health concern. And there's really the characteristics of it. Whoever's listening to this show, either you yourself and listeners out there, either you've experienced burnout or somebody has. That I feel very confident in. Deloitte's done a recent study where 77% of current employees are experience some symptoms of burnout, right? Exhaustion, extremely tired. You've kind of lost your sense of purpose at your job. You really don't care anymore. And then also the component of your competence or your efficacy has been reduced or you don't care about. So for me, the way I think of it, Paul, what's the opposite of that is something that I actually heard, and I really like the way it was phrased. It's called like an ABC method. Okay. And A stands for autonomy, B is for belonging, and C is for competence. So from an autonomy perspective, it's having personal autonomy, but also professional autonomy. B is belonging. So ideally, it's going to be at your place of employment, but it also can be somewhere if you have a hobby. Let's say you're into food, cars, gardening, et cetera, where you're more proud of the name on the front of the jersey than the back of the jersey. And the last being competence, knowing that you are good at what you do. If you're really checking off all those 3 boxes, I think you're going to be in really good shape. So what I do is I help my clients attack the autonomy, and then depending
Mhm.
on where they're located, I can help them attack the belonging aspect.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a good kind of framework to outline. What is more the definition of the competence piece?
For me, the definition from a common piece is like you are good at what you do, right? I
Okay.
think like anything in life, whoever's done it, that if you're good at something, you know you're good at something, you want to continue to strive and do better at
Hmm.
that versus something that you completely stink at. Like, so for
Hmm.
example, right? I don't know if you're a golfer. I golf. I'm not the best. I like to play and I continue to like to work at it, but I'm a 54 handicap. So
Okay.
that's, you can't get any worse than a 54 handicap. Can't do it. So, well, I like to play. It's always fun. I don't take it too seriously. I also find it more of a challenge for me to improve, right? Versus, let's say it's something else like ping pong. I like ping pong. I'm actually pretty good at ping pong, where you're naturally, if you're striving and you're really good at something, you're going to be more apt to continue to work on that skill.
Yeah, I enjoy playing golf. I love golf simulators and I
Yeah.
love miniature golf. So yes, I am, I guess, also wearing some golf attire. What does that maybe conversation or thought process look like for individuals as it relates to competence? Well, my specific question is, if I am a doctor, maybe I decided to change my life and go become a doctor, or maybe it's a different life. I'm now a doctor. I have, that competence. That's my unique skill, my craft, career, etc. But then as I look to, diversify income through either active or passive investments, that's not something, I've done before, most likely. I'm
Yeah.
not counting buying a house as an investment because it's not unless you absolutely treat it like it. It's to say that, you're almost you have that confidence, but you're almost like breaking out of that mold and you're, changing your identity and focusing on other things. Then sometimes people are balancing of like, I raise funds for multifamily, but I'm also a doctor. I've not seen that yet.
Yeah.
But again, just those sort of pieces. That's why I believe like passive investing is so like beneficial. At the same
Yep.
time, it does require still education on it, but passive investing is obviously less time intensive, if you will, than active investing, or at least it's kind of a one-time, piece. So do you feel there's like a conflict in the sense of like going after your competence? Because I have talked to some or know some in the medical field that are almost like hesitant of making income in a different way or elsewhere because they're not then fulfilling what they feel is like their lifelong dream of helping people, right? If they're no longer that doctor, for example, and they're just that investor, they're not then helping people as they envision their childhood hero to be, which was the doctor. Have you seen like kind of that conflict or
So
conversation people are having with
I
themselves?
haven't come across that, and I think the reason being too is the physicians and the dentists and nurses that I'm speaking with, right? They've gotten into medicine for a reason. Like you said, it's to help people and putting others in front of themselves. So by exploring going into the investing and investing as a passive investor, like you're talking about, and all the benefits that
Yeah.
come with it, right? That's a truly hands-off approach. So if one is still looking to practice medicine and to help others, that is an avenue that they can still do so. What this is providing is a vehicle, though, to where maybe if they're working a certain amount of hours, they might have the ability to reduce their hours to something that's more manageable. Or if they're going down and from an income perspective, again, it's giving them now the confidence, right? We talked about burnout. I think there's a huge difference. We talked about mindset too, Paul. There's a huge difference when you have to work knowing like you need to be here from an income
Mm-hmm.
perspective
Mm-hmm.
versus you have the income where you're here because you want to be here. That is a massive, you
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about a mind shift and a mindset perspective. That is two totally different things. That is huge. And then the other piece too, as far as an education, you're right. For the amount of time that's spent in school, like we talked about, 11, 12, 13, 14 years, that's a tremendous amount of time to become a physician and to get so specialized in what you do. What I always say is if one can go that route, they can learn real estate
Sure.
100%, 10
Mm-hmm.
times out of 10. And this is becoming much more, there's so many now avenues where one can start getting educated within real estate where physician-led type of organizations exist between podcasts and communities, right? There's White Coat Investor by Dr. Jim Daly. There's Passive Income MD by Dr. Peter Kim. And then there's Money Meets Medicine is another one from Jeff Harding. And that has its own, again, podcast and also online educational resources that can be used. So there's so many, this is becoming much more prevalent amongst the medical community, similar to if you think of it from a professional athlete perspective. I think everyone's heard of all these cases. Like there's a famous basketball player in Boston, Antoine Walker, who any NBA fans out there will know when he hit his threes, he would do that little shoulder shimmy. But unfortunately, he's come into some financial hardship. And now there's much more of a focus on financial education for professional athletes and kind of building that community support system, getting the knowledge base to attack this. So that would be my answer to, what physicians can do, how they can go about learning more about it and start dipping their toes in the water, and how that can be a complement to what they're doing for work if they so choose to do so.
Yeah. What have you found in terms of like financial education for people to, learn or have? And I guess we'll start with like real estate education, just because you recently mentioned that. Like, how do I learn about, real estate, if you will? And obviously there's the dissemination between commercial and residential. But what have you found for resources out there for medical professionals as well as, other people too?
Yeah. So a great book by Brian Burke is called Hands Off Investor. And that really just talks about, again, what we're talking about is real estate syndications. And for those out there that aren't as familiar with the real estate syndication, a very high level summary that I like to explain it is we're pulling together individuals who what we call limited partners, pulling together assets to look to acquire a property or properties. So let's say it's a large 100+ unit apartment building that they otherwise wouldn't be able to acquire on their own. And they were relying on the general partner or partners to execute that business plan. So from the limited partner perspective, they are truly hands off. Their risk involved with the investment is at-risk capital, their principal, just like if they're investing in the stock market. Whereas the general partners, in addition to their capital that they're investing, they have all the responsibility and risk especially from a loan perspective. If there's any lawsuits brought against, it would be go against the GP versus the LP. So that's how I explain really what the syndication is. And then in the education wise, talk about that book. There's another book around mindset that everyone knows about, or at least a lot of folks I feel like know about, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And then for medical professionals specifically, some of the other resources and areas that I spoke about were, there's White Coat Investor by Dr. Jim Daly, Passive Income MD, Dr. Peter Kim, talked about money, means, and medicine. I myself have also put together some educational financial resources. So I put together a playbook, Financial X, how medical professionals win through passive real estate investing. It talks about the risks, the benefits, questions to ask when, let's say, you're vetting maybe general partners, sample investment scenarios, etc. Go in YouTube. There's podcasts. There's so many now areas for education to learn and start getting yourself familiarized with this world.
Yeah, certainly. How would you then say in terms of education of what type of investment, right? So in the alternative investment space, being defined as things that are essentially, not stocks and bonds. So real estate, residential, commercial, things like oil and gas, as well as even, creative things such as crypto funds or even, ATMs and all the alike. How does someone evaluate like what is the best type of investment for them?
So
in terms of like asset class is my initial question.
So as far as from an asset class perspective, each asset class within real estate is going to have its own unique attributes and strengths to it, right? So we could talk about and for those out there, there's so many different asset classes. You got self-storage, RV parks, short-term rentals, talks about oil and gas, multifamily, hotel to multifamily conversion, et cetera. So the first piece that I always tell folks to think about is I break it down to 4 buckets. It's cash flow, it's liquidity, it's appreciation, and it's tax benefits. Thinking about it in those 4 buckets and then stack ranking, okay, what's most important for you from a return profile and overall portfolio construction. Once you have that mapped out and defined, I think that's when you can maybe start to look at and start to research what asset classes would be the best fit for that. So for example, if liquidity is the number one option for folks, so that's most important, they want to get good yield in their money, right? For me, I would think something like a real estate debt fund would be a pretty good or something to look at because you can get good yield in your money, somewhere between 8, 9, 10% with a 90-day liquidity type option. So if you need to get your money back for whatever certain circumstance, that option is there. If folks are looking from a tax benefit perspective, right, some asset classes have more tax benefits than others, right? I know oil and gas has huge tax benefits for folks. Yep. Another one that's got huge tax benefits from an appreciation standpoint is RV parks. So it really, I would say, again, it's first defining what that's most important for you at this given time. And then off of that, start having conversations between folks that are in the space, going to meetups, networking, again, listening to podcasts that we talked about and learning more about that asset class. And then it's starting to then having conversations with specific groups within that space.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of individuals that are, going for tax incentive route because, you're required to pay that tax regardless. And so by offsetting your high income, especially for those in the medical field, you then have that, passive cash flow. That passive cash flow gives you that, peace of mind, flexibility, et cetera, with financial, mindset. And then to your point, it's, hey, I want to be in the places I want to be, not, have to be. And I've then seen how people take that, cash flow to then change kind of careers or jobs, what have you, or as well as, again, peace of mind. And then also take, W-2 down payment to then, actually purchase assets from an active standpoint.
Yeah.
So meaning to say it's kind of like this choose your own adventure sort of thing of like how you, construct it and what is, to your point, like your end goal of which you would then, organize around it. I've seen some to then say that they, only meet people in the multifamily space. Most people start with syndications in the multifamily space. So, it's typically the first person that you meet. And just from my experience being a commercial real estate broker, everyone starts in the multifamily space because they believe they know it because they lived in an apartment once.
Yeah.
That opinion aside, although fundamentally I feel it's a fact. Regardless, it's to say that, people then I've seen have like gone for like, hey, I really want that big payout in 3 to 5 years, but then they're holding on for that, future marshmallow to the point that they're struggling in the today. Again, the same thing we talked about in the earlier part of the episode of, again, hey, that, kind of golden pot at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
So it's definitely important for, your point in the sense of, liquidity is a kind of a temporary thing, cash flow, more of a, consistent sort of longer term thing, tax incentive, like a one-time piece that also has that sort of long-term thing. And then obviously kind of equity piece that is then the, longer term thing to then kind of figure out what asset class is beneficial. Certainly there's market condition and location areas to, look into too, but this ain't that podcast. What have you found with, as people are getting closer and closer to, financial freedom because they have financial flexibility, things like that?
Yep.
Have you seen how their, perspective and lifestyle has changed? And if so, how?
Yeah. So I think once you're really getting to that point, I think it all comes back to even why you started getting involved and why you want to start investing in real estate to start working towards being financial independent or work optional in the first place, right? Is it to spend more time with family? Is it to travel more? Is it to do more things on a philanthropic level, right? Yeah. Everyone's got their own reasons as to why they want to get started. Like what's leading them down this path. And as you're getting that much closer, it starts to become a reality where heck, if your goal was, hey, I want to travel and hey, all right, I'm going to start every month, I'm going to hop somewhere different every 2 months or every 3 months and just kind of, not necessarily backpack, but just kind of do the Airbnb kind of lifestyle and be able to explore different places, So I think once you really get closer to that, you can start exploring why in attacking the things that led you down this path in the first place, which I think that's a very exciting thing.
Yeah, it's definitely fun for sure. What have you found for individuals who then have, achieved that sort of success? Have you seen that they've given back and want to pour into others, or what does that look like, especially in the medical field? Again, if they're maybe only working part-time or don't work at all, how are they continuing in their, practice kind of career? Or have you found they are, just that kind of full-time investor?
So far, what my experience has been working with clients is it's been working, what their goal is to be working towards not necessarily leaving the medical field entirely, but it's more from a reduction of hours. That's been the majority, not everybody, but that's kind of the majority piece of it. And the other piece too is it's where then again, which I touched upon is, okay, if I'm now getting this type of income, this also is giving me the added confidence to start exploring going into an opening my own private practice versus working at a major employer. And there's a lot less. I would say a good phrase is there's a lot of what I would call the proliferation of the administrative class at a lot of in the medical field for medical professionals right now. And I think if you get in the private side of things, that can be greatly reduced. So having now this additional type of income provide to start looking, giving you the added confidence to explore, because again, you're going from working at a public employer to really you're now being your own entrepreneur. So having this gives that added confidence.
Yeah, certainly. What have you recommended people to understand what their goals are? Is that some sort of like worksheet or exercise or mindset?
Yeah, it's a combination. So one of the first things when I chat with someone is it's a very much open-ended question. And I recognize too how busy medical professionals are. They're taking, a half hour, 45 minutes out of their day. It's, what were you hoping to accomplish? What were you hoping to learn today? And then it's more than kind of starting to peeling back the layers of the onion of talking about what their investment experience is, what they're looking to achieve. What are you hoping that real estate can provide for you? Okay, is you're hoping real estate can provide you passive income. Okay, again, it's fantastic. What's passive income? What do you want passive income to be able to do for you? I want to be able to work less. Okay, great. So if you want to work less, what would you do now? If you want to work less, what are you hoping to do during that time? And it's really trying to get to the root cause. So then it's really something that then can be written down on a piece of paper, like, hey, okay, write down, this is why the path you want to go. This is what you want to do. So you kind of now have a North Star that you can look at when you're going down the journey.
Yeah, I've definitely found for myself to understand, my 5 core values and then building, goals off that and incorporating what my ideal life is into that. So that way it is on alignment. Hey, I really want, cash flow, but cash flow that's passive, right, is very different than cash flow that's active.
Yeah.
Because then I can go, travel internationally and not have to deal with silly short-term rental things because I have both, active and passive investments. And then also do things like a, 3-year vision, right? To really say, hey, like this is my ideal day. And that really compounds to this. And in 3 years, this is what my ideal day will look like in terms of context, as well as ideal day in the sense of practicality. So practicality, at least for me, is, going to the gym, kind of working out sort of thing for at least 45, minutes each day. And then having some sort of kind of morning routine aspect. I found that it kind of changes in a number of reasons and places, but fundamentally shutting my phone off and in another room for 2 to 4 hours a day, meet at least one new person, having meaningful conversation with them. And then the nighttime is then just, being around friends, family, or potentially by myself, right? And those days are, certainly what I strive to build my schedule around and only allow those things. But again, there's context around, I'm in Costa Rica, I'm, still in Austin, like kind of stuff too that people have, and the unknown of it too, because I'm financially, free or flexible. I might make decisions different than I would otherwise be able to, kind of today sorts. With medical professionals specifically, I found, yes, it depends on, the role, right? Doctors are having different type of, schedules than necessarily nurses. But it's that oftentimes you have not, 9 to 5 type schedules, right? They're kind of working 3 to 4 days a week, long hours, and they have all this time. What would you say in terms of recommendation? Maybe it's for everyone, or maybe it's specifically for medical professionals in the sense of, you have, ideally you're making great money. And so you want to go travel. So is your recommendation to go do the travel and do the things and kind of spend and save a little bit? Or is it more, kind of hunker down with the money that you have and invest it and potentially, I don't know, get a second job or have some additional income source and kind of, maximize things out? We talked about burnout before, and I've seen where sometimes people go from, oh, I can make 20% more if I go to this job, and then burn themselves out thinking that they'll then save that 20% or invest that 20% to then get out of it. But in all reality, they're just, burnt out. And so they're emotionally basically spending on even more travel and, getting Uber Eats every night and that kind of thing, where really it just kind of dissipates. So it's a question of more, do you enjoy, is it kind of a recommendation, or how have you seen enjoying things along the way and, saving up and investing slowly? Or is it more kind of that big, swing to be intentional about investing and then, kind of reaping the rewards?
Yeah, so you could attack that a number of different ways. I think some of the things though that I very much recommend is depending on what part of the country you are, as far as like a student loan debt perspective, right? The national average student debt for a physician coming out of school is in excess of 200,000. Again, that's going to vary tremendously what part of the country you're in, but that's national average. I think one of the pieces is definitely looking to attack that in some way, form, or fashion and try to get that squared away as soon as you can, ideally, because that would be a huge weight off of everyone's shoulders, whoever's ever had student loan debt. That's a great weight to get off. Now, there is obviously there is the component, which is the student loan forgiveness program. Working in a public employer for 10 years, there's been, for those that have followed it nationally, there's been some changes that seem like for the better for that, but that's again something you'd want to verify.
Sure.
And then the other piece though too is when you're talking about which road to go, I think once there can be a tendency for physicians once they're finishing school and they're starting to make good money, then it's like, all right, I'm starting to make some good money to maybe live kind of lavishly or get a really expensive car or just start going on a spending spree. So that I candidly would say, let's try to at least pump the brakes on that component. If you can, live within the similar means that you have been doing when you were in residency for another 2 to 3 years, I think would pay huge dividends. And then as far as, should someone just hunker down or just not do anything and travel? I mean, for me, I think you need to sprinkle in something that you really outside of work enjoy, that, you need that kind of break. Everyone's gone here, again, yourself, Paul, anyone listening, or if you're at a job and you're like, man, I just need to take a vacation. I need something that's going to give me like a reset, right? A recharge. I think I myself am a proponent of that, let's say, versus just kind of going, and then to the point where you're completely wiped out type of deal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all checks and balances with everything. But that's really the first and foremost, though, pieces that I always recommend regardless is really starting to try to tackle student loan debt. And then also, especially for younger physicians, just not going rogue as far as spending is concerned.
Yeah, certainly. Is then the thought to like completely pay off student loan debt and then, go investment? Or is it, kind of a yes and where you're, making the minimum payments to chip away at it, then you're investing, for the greater returns?
I think it depends too what your current interest rate is also too in your student loans. I think plays a huge component. Like if you can get
But they're sub 10, right? Like they're sub 10%?
I mean, overall, yeah, but now, so then it's about looking at if you can find an investment like through an arbitrage opportunity that could maybe be higher than what that rate on your loan is.
And that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
What the liquidity could be to do it that way. So that's a kind of one strategy, again, you can look at and do. Again, the other is, hey, is it possible to get a student loan forgiveness but then you'd have to work at that employer for 10 years. So those are some of the pieces to really consider when you're looking at it. But at the very least, as far as just not, student loans, trying to attack those, I do think that is an avenue that you should do, and again, in a prudent manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for context for those, so arbitrage then being the delta between the two investments. So if you have a loan at 5% and you have an investment at 15, that 10% delta could then pay for that 5% loan. So it could be advantageous to invest in that investment to then cover the expense of that previous loan you had. The only challenge of sorts is that investments are, have their risk. And so it's not a done deal of, hey, I talked to this multifamily person at a luncheon and they said, I'm going to get 15% IRR, personal experience. And then this will help, solve all my problems. And then I can do this and this and still have a couple $100 to, buy a new pair of shoes, right? So there is a lot of factors in it. It is a risk thing. I've really used leverage with finances to, produce my portfolio and what I believe in, the deltas of things. But if stuff really hit the fan for me, I would sleep in my car, and there's no shame or, concern or issue on that. But people have different thresholds by all means. So, understanding what that is, talking to a financial planner, an accountant, and also people who are raising private placements that have good experience. I'll include a book or link to a book that I've read of investing in private placements, because it's not just great. I know this person, they seem, this and that, the returns look good because it's a pretty PowerPoint, let's invest. There are multiple things to ask and consider for all people, regardless if you're super busy, burnt out in the medical professional field or not. One thing I always ask everyone on the show is, this is the guide to joy, right? And so certainly talked about burnout and like investment and perspective and a number of different things, but like, what would you leave in the guide, either a quote, a mantra, an experience, a story that other people should really, take in and process?
Yeah. So there's oh man, there could be a whole bunch of those, Paul. The heck with a quote. We could write a whole
Write a
chapter or
book.
novel on that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would say one of the biggest pieces though is, and we've touched on this component, is really around mindset, and then specifically surrounding yourself with the right people. Again, if you want to surround yourself with like-minded, ambitious, driven people who are doing already what you're doing or in something that you want to do. So there's another phrase that goes around about don't take advice from those who haven't done what you've done, or also don't listen to folks from a criticism perspective who haven't walked in your shoes or even trying to do that in your shoes, right? So
yeah,
like for me, like from my background, right? My parents I very close to my mom. And right, for me, when I went down this road, Paul, of going from the solopreneur, right, the mindset is very much, when's your next paycheck coming? Right. So, and for her, it's a level more so of like concern. She's saying it out of love. Right. But for me to then start asking, let's say going to her from a source to go from let's say an entrepreneur journey and the mindset shift that we're talking about. Right? I love my mom. She's my, best friend, but that wouldn't be for the appropriate person for me to talk to, because it's a totally different mindset. Right. With regards to building wealth, work, and income generation. So I tie that all back to mindset and surrounding yourself and being around people that are doing what you're doing, what you want to do. And so you can spitball and share different experiences and learn.
Yeah.
Don't be around negative people. Don't be around negative people. They are,
and that's a rule. Yeah.
Right.
Love it. Well, thanks, Rob, for coming on. Appreciate you sharing your insights and, how you've been able to help so many people.
Awesome. No, thanks, Paul. I appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, you bet. If something resonated with you today, share it with a friend. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, leave a 5-star review. It's one of the best ways that I can know what and how I'm doing is being beneficial to you and your life as a listener. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on next episode.